The air in Buriram doesn't just blow, it sticks. At 35 degrees Celsius with 80% humidity, the Chang International Circuit is a pressure cooker for both man and machine. But for Toprak Razgatlioglu, the heat wasn't the enemy. It was the silence coming from his front tire. As he tipped the 2026 Yamaha V4 into the 330 km/h funnel of Turn 1, he pulled the lever. Nothing. For a heartbeat that felt like an eternity, the brake lever hit the handlebar with zero resistance. It was empty. In the high-stakes world of MotoGP, where the difference between a podium and a high-speed disaster is measured in millimeters of hydraulic pressure, an empty lever is the ultimate nightmare. Toprak is a rider who lives on the limit of the front end. His entire racing DNA is built on stop-style entries that defy physics. But at that moment, the ghost in the machine had taken control. He managed to wobble through the runoff area, his hands raised in a frantic signal to the pit wall. Something was fundamentally wrong. The paddock held its breath, sensing that the fairy tale move of the Superbike king to the Yamaha factory was hitting its first, and perhaps most dangerous wall. Yet, as the cameras panned to the Yamaha garage, the technical glitch was only half the story. The real storm was just beginning to brew behind the sliding doors of the garage. To understand why this moment paralyzed the Yamaha garage, you have to understand the man they call El Turco. Toprak Razgatlioglu didn't come to MotoGP to participate, he came to colonize it. After ending a 6-year dynasty in World Superbikes and proving he could win on a struggling BMW, his move to Yamaha's new V4 project for 2026 was the biggest gamble in a decade. He is the architect of aggression, a rider who uses the front brake not just to slow down, but to steer, to intimidate, and to conquer. But MotoGP is a different beast. Unlike the production-based bikes he mastered, these 300 horsepower prototypes use carbon fiber brakes that require surgical precision and a specific thermal window. Toprak's transition had already been a roller coaster. While he showed flashes of brilliance in the Sepang tests, Buriram was the true litmus test. The track demands hard-stop excellence at the end of its 3 massive straights. If Toprak couldn't trust the front end, he wasn't just slow, he was a passenger on a rocket ship. The team had hoped Thailand would be the turning point where the V4 engine and Toprak's style finally shook hands. Instead, the humidity was exposing a microscopic flaw that threatened to derail their entire season before the first race even finished. And as the data engineers stared at their monitors, they realized the problem wasn't something they could fix with a laptop. As FP2 progressed, the atmosphere inside the Prima Pramac Yamaha box turned toxic. Every time Toprak entered the pits, his feedback became more frantic. "One lap it's there, the next lap it's gone," he told his crew chief. The technical data was a riddle. On paper, the hydraulic pressure looked stable, but the physical reality on the track was a vapor lock. A phenomenon where the brake fluid literally boils in the tie heat, creating gas bubbles that make the lever feel like a sponge. The engineers were under immense pressure. Yamaha had abandoned their legendary inline-4 engine for this new V4 configuration specifically to find more speed, but the new engine layout had changed the bike's heat signature. The cooling ducts that worked in the cool air of Europe were failing in the predatory heat of Buriram. Toprak was out there risking his life at the end of a 1.2-kilometer straight, essentially guessing if his brakes would work. On the other side of the garage, teammate Jack Miller was taking a different route, sacrificing raw speed for stability, but Toprak refused to compromise. He wanted the bike to bend to his will. The tension was no longer just technical, it was becoming a clash of philosophies between the rider's instinct and the factory's engineering. But the breaking point wasn't reached on the track. It happened when Toprak stepped off the bike and saw the look of uncertainty on his mechanics' faces. Television cameras usually capture the polished side of MotoGP, but in Thailand they caught the raw, unedited fury of a champion. Toprak dismounted, and before his boots even hit the garage floor, his gloves were off. He didn't just place them on the workbench, he threw them with the force of a man who felt betrayed by his equipment. His voice, usually calm and composed, rose to a high pitch as he confronted his chief mechanic. This wasn't just a rider having a tantrum, this was a garage inferno. The internal politics of a factory team are delicate. The Japanese engineers from Iwata value data-first logic, and a rider publicly showing such raw emotion is often seen as a breach of protocol. Paddock whispers began to circulate immediately. Was Toprak too superbike for the corporate world of MotoGP? Was the pressure of being Yamaha's savior finally cracking the Turkish star? Inside the garage, the mechanics scrambled, dismantling the entire front end of the M1 in a desperate search for a culprit. They replaced calipers, master cylinders, and even the carbon discs, but the invisible wall remained. The rift between Toprak's needs and the bike's capabilities was widening by the minute. Just as the team thought they had identified a faulty sensor, a new piece of information surfaced that turned the entire investigation upside down. The investigation into the empty lever led the engineers to a shocking discovery. The problem wasn't just the brakes, it was the engine. The 2026 V4 engine was producing a different type of vibration, a high-frequency chatter, that was resonating through the forks and causing the brake pads to knock back away from the discs. Every time Toprak hit a bump, the pads retracted, meaning the first pull of the lever was spent just pushing the pads back into place. This was a V4 identity crisis. Yamaha had built a powerhouse, but they hadn't yet figured out how to stop it. While rivals like Ducati and KTM had spent years refining their V4 chassis to handle these vibrations, Yamaha was in the middle of a steep and painful learning curve. For Toprak, this was a psychological blow. He realized he wasn't just fighting his rivals on the track, he was a test pilot for a project that was still in its infancy. The Stoppy King was being forced to ride with a safety margin, a concept that didn't exist in his vocabulary. The garage remained open until 3:00 a.m., the lights of the Chang International Circuit casting long, haunting shadows over a bike that was currently more of a liability than an asset. The team manager, Massimo Marigelli, was seen in a heated discussion with factory technicians late into the night. They had one last radical solution to try, but it came with a massive risk. The solution was a complete overhaul of the braking cooling system, using experimental 3D-printed carbon ducts that had never been race-tested. It was a Hail Mary pass. As dawn broke over the Buriram paddocks, a strange calm settled over the Yamaha box. Toprak arrived for the morning session looking different. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, calculated focus, the assassin mindset that had won him 2 world titles. He had made a decision. If the bike wouldn't stop, he would make it stop. In a brief interview before the race, he was composed but blunt. "I just want a consistent feeling," he said. "If I trust my brakes, I can fight with anyone." It was a warning shot to the rest of the grid. That night, the team hadn't just fixed a bike, they had potentially forged a new bond with their rider. But the question remained, would the experimental parts hold up for 26 laps under the brutal Thai sun? Or was the empty lever destined to return at the worst possible moment? As the riders lined up on the grid, the heat haze shimmering off the asphalt, the tension reached a breaking point. Toprak stared down the long straight toward turn 1. The lights began to glow red. He reached out and squeezed the lever. It was firm, for now. But in MotoGP, the only thing more dangerous than a bike that won't stop is a rider who has nothing left to lose. The story of the 2026 season was no longer about a technical glitch. It was about whether Toprak Razgatlioglu would conquer the machine, or if the machine would finally break him.